July 18th, 1944, Normandy, France. Rain fell in a cold, steady drizzle over the bocage country south of Cannes, turning farm tracks into ribbons of slick mud that clung to boots and track links alike. In a field near the village of St. Honorine, American engineers from the First Army's Technical Intelligence Section stood in stunned silence around a hulking silhouette half hidden in the hedgerows. Before them sat Panzerkampfwagen Tiger Aus, B, chassis number 2803, the third of 5 brand-new King Tigers that had rolled out of the Henschel factory in Kassel just 4 months earlier. Its 8.8-centimeter KWK-43 gun, capable of punching through 150 millimeters of armor at 2,000 meters, pointed uselessly toward the sky. Its 180 millimeter turret armor, sloped to deflect shells like rain, was unscarred by battle. The hatches were open. The crew was gone. The fuel tanks were empty. This machine had not been destroyed by Sherman shells, by artillery, or by air attack. It had broken down, its final drive shattered, its transmission seized after traveling less than 50 kilometers from its assembly point. Of the 5 King Tigers assigned to the elite 316 Funklank Panzer Company, only one had reached the front. The other 4 lay scattered across the Norman countryside, immobilized not by enemy action, but by their own design. For months, Allied tankers had lived in dread of this beast. Intelligence briefings painted it as invincible. 69.8 tons of steel, a gun that outranged every Allied cannon, armor that shrugged off 76mm rounds like pebbles. British crews at Villers-Bocage spoke in hushed tones of shells bouncing off frontal plates at point-blank range. Soviet reports from the Eastern Front described T-34s exploding before they closed to 1,500 meters. The King Tiger wasn't just a tank. It was Germany's last gamble, a mechanical fortress meant to offset overwhelming Allied numbers through sheer technological terror. But here, in the mud of Normandy, the truth was far less dramatic and far more damning. The King Tiger's fatal flaw wasn't its armor or its gun. It was its drivetrain. German engineers had taken the Maybach HL-230 P-30 engine, 700 horsepower, identical to the one in the 45-ton Panther, and bolted it into a chassis 25 tons heavier. The result was a power-to-weight ratio of barely 10 horsepower per ton, compared to the Sherman's 13.3. To move 70 tons, the transmission, final drives, and suspension were pushed far beyond their design limits. Gear teeth stripped under load, bearings seized from heat, overlapping road wheels, intended to distribute weight, clogged with mud, and froze solid in winter, making field repairs nearly impossible. American engineers, crawling over chassis 2803, saw the evidence everywhere. Wear patterns on synchronizer rings showed chronic overloading. Scoring on bearing races indicated insufficient lubrication under stress. The final drive housing, a single casting meant to transfer torque to the tracks, was cracked from torsional fatigue. One Detroit-trained mechanical engineer wrote in his report, "No U.S. automaker would certify this drivetrain for a vehicle over 50 tons. The safety margins are non-existent." The fuel consumption was equally catastrophic. The King Tiger carried 860 liters of gasoline, yet managed only 120 kilometers on roads, 80 off-road. A Sherman, with 660 liters, traveled 200 kilometers. In the summer of 1944, as Allied bombers pounded Germany's synthetic fuel plants into rubble, this inefficiency wasn't just inconvenient. It was strategic suicide. A single King Tiger required 30% more fuel to to go 40% less distance than a Sherman. For a Wehrmacht already rationing fuel to training units, this was unsustainable. Nowhere was this more evident than in the Battle of the Bulge. On December 16, 1944, Kampfgruppe Piper, the spearhead of Hitler's last offensive, rolled into the Ardennes with 45 King Tigers from Schwerer SS Panzerabteilung 501. The plan was audacious. Race 100 kilometers to the Meuse River, seize bridges, capture Allied fuel dumps, and split the Allied armies. But reality intervened before the first shot was fired. 12 King Tigers never left the assembly area. Engines seized, transmissions failed during warm-up. Of the 33 that advanced, only 6 reached Piper's final position at La Glaise. The rest broke down on hills, through tracks on icy roads, or burned through their fuel reserves before reaching the front. Among the survivors was Tiger 213, commanded by SS Obersturmführer Helmut Dinger. Positioned on high ground at Weimar Farm, it dominated the valley below. Its 8.8-centimeter gun engaging American Task Force McGeorge at 2,000 meters, far beyond the Sherman's effective range. For 2 days, Tiger 213 held the line. Then an American round, possibly a lucky hit, shattered its gun barrel. With the weapon disabled and Piper's force surrounded, out of fuel, and cut off from supply, retreat became the only option. On the night of December 23rd, 800 men slipped away on foot, abandoning 135 armored vehicles, including 6 King Tigers. When American recovery teams arrived, they found Tiger 213 intact, its hatches open, its engine cold, its crew long gone, rather than scrap it. Local cafe owner Janny Guerin-Dussart intervened, offering U.S. soldiers a bottle of cognac in exchange for the tank. She wanted it preserved, not as a trophy, but as a memorial to La Glaise's suffering. Today, it stands in the village square, the only King Tiger still displayed on its original battlefield. A silent testament to ambition undone by mechanics. Another survivor, Tiger 332, tells a different story. Abandoned near Petite Chapelle on December 24th. It was recovered by the 740th Tank Battalion and shipped to Aberdeen Proving Ground. There, American engineers dissected it with clinical precision. They confirmed what frontline troops already knew. The armor was formidable, the optics superb, the gun terrifying, but the drivetrain was a time bomb. In 1991, it was moved to Fort Benning and cut open to reveal its interior, a teaching tool on the cost of over-engineering. Soviet testing at Kubinka reached the same conclusion. 2 King Tigers captured near Sandomierz in August 1944 broke down every 10 to 15 kilometers during transit to the proving ground. One's gearbox failed completely. The other's suspension collapsed under its own weight. Soviet engineers noted that the King Tiger's own 8.8-centimeter gun could penetrate its turret at 400 meters, a damning indictment of its invincible armor. They also documented poor weld quality in the turret ring, a flaw that compromised structural integrity under repeated firing stress. By war's end, the statistics told a brutal story. 492 King Tigers produced, fewer than the number of Shermans built in a single month. 379 in 1944, 112 in 1945. Production crippled by Allied bombing of the Henschel factory. Operational readiness, 59% in March 1945. Better than the Panther's 48%, but still catastrophic for a front-line weapon. Losses. More King Tigers were abandoned from mechanical failure than destroyed in combat. German crews, once promised an invincible war machine, grew disillusioned. Veterans of Kursk and Kharkov, men who had mastered the original Tiger, found the King Tiger unforgiving. Aggressive shifting risked transmission failure. Turning in place stressed final drives. Even routine marches required recovery vehicles that rarely existed. As one driver wrote in his diary, "We fear not the enemy, but the road." American tankers, meanwhile, evolved from fear to understanding. In July 1944, the mere rumor of a King Tiger sent Sherman scrambling for cover. By December, they knew the truth. Force it to move, and it would break. They learned to avoid frontal engagements, instead using mobility to flank or simply waiting for mechanical failure. They discovered King Tigers couldn't cross most bridges, limiting their routes and making them predictable targets for fighter bombers. The deeper lesson reshaped American military philosophy for generations. Post-war tank design, M48, M60, M1 Abrams, prioritized reliability, maintainability, and strategic mobility over raw firepower. Engineers internalized the King Tiger's warning: the most powerful gun is useless if the tank can't reach the battlefield. But the story goes deeper still, into the very heart of Germany's industrial collapse. The King Tiger consumed 321,500 Reichsmarks per unit, enough to build 3 Panzer IVs or 2 Panthers. At a time when skilled labor was scarce, tungsten for armor-piercing rounds was rationed, and molybdenum for hardened steel was nearly exhausted. This extravagance was indefensible. Albert Speer himself, in his memoirs, admitted that heavy tank production diverted critical resources from more practical weapons like the Stug 3 assault gun, which accounted for more Allied tank kills than any other German vehicle. Moreover, the King Tiger's complexity crippled battlefield recovery. A thrown track on a Sherman could be repaired by the crew in under an hour using a tow cable and brute force. On a King Tiger, with its interleaved road wheels, replacing an inner wheel required removing 3 outer wheels first, a process that took 8 hours with specialized tools. In winter, mud and ice froze between the wheels, welding them solid. A failed transmission weighed over 500 kilograms and required a 50-ton crane to replace, equipment that simply didn't exist at the front. This fragility extended to combat doctrine. German armored units were trained to fight defensively from prepared positions, where the King Tiger's range and armor gave it dominance. But by 1944, Germany was almost always on the strategic defensive, yet tactically forced to attack, to counter Allied landings, to plug breakthroughs, to launch desperate offensives like the Bulge. Each time a King Tiger was ordered to advance, it rolled the dice with its drivetrain, and more often than not, it lost. Consider the fate of Schwere Panzerabteilung 501 on the Eastern Front. In August 1944, it entrained at Paderborn with 45 King Tigers bound for the Vistula River. Even rail transport proved treacherous. Special flat cars were required, and loading ramps collapsed under the weight. After detraining, a 50-kilometer road march became a disaster. 37 tanks broke down before reaching the front. Only 8 engaged Soviet T-34-85s near Oglandov, and 3 were lost to flanking fire, exposing a critical vulnerability. Side armor of only 80 millimeters, penetrable by 76 millimeters guns at 500 meters. This led to a doctrinal shift. Ammunition was moved from the turret to the hull, reducing ready rounds from 84 to 68, but improving crew survival. Yet even these adaptations couldn't overcome the fundamental mismatch between design and reality. The King Tiger was conceived in the optimistic haze of 1942, when Germany still believed in short, decisive campaigns fueled by captured resources. By 1944, it was fighting a war of attrition against enemies with infinite industrial capacity. America alone built 18,000 Shermans, more than 36 times the total King Tiger production. Ford's Willow Run plant turned out one Sherman every 45 minutes at peak output. Henschel, by contrast, struggled to complete 5 King Tigers per week, and many never left the factory floor due to bombing raids. The psychological impact on German morale was profound. Crews who had trained for months to master this wonder weapon found themselves stranded on rural roads, watching their fuel gauges drop while American fighter bombers circled overhead. The gap between propaganda and reality eroded the very fighting spirit the regime relied upon. For the Allies, the King Tiger became a teaching tool in humility and pragmatism. Yes, it was fearsome in ideal conditions, but war is never ideal. Mud, cold, distance, fuel shortages, mechanical stress, these are the true arbiters of battlefield success. The Sherman may have been outgunned, but it started every morning, crossed every river, and kept moving when others stopped. Today, the King Tiger endures in popular culture as the ultimate German tank, a symbol of engineering might. But the real legacy lies in the mud of Normandy, the snow of the Ardennes, the ruins of La Glaise. It is the story of a weapon that could destroy anything in front of it, yet couldn't survive the journey to get there. Germany didn't lose because its tanks were inferior in a gunfight. It lost because its logistics collapsed, its industry faltered, and its machines betrayed their crews. The King Tiger wasn't defeated by superior tactics or numbers. It was defeated by physics, friction, and the unforgiving arithmetic of industrial war. In the end, the Allies didn't need to outgun the King Tiger. They just needed to outlast it. And thanks to factories in Detroit, Cleveland, and Chicago, they did. And so, the King Tiger stands, not as a monument to German invincibility, but as a cautionary tale that in modern warfare, sustainability beats spectacle. Reliability trumps raw power, and the side that keeps moving wins. The King Tiger was never truly defeated on the battlefield. It was defeated long before it ever saw combat, by the drafting tables that ignored physics, by the factories that couldn't keep pace with demand, by the logistics system that ran dry while the tank still thirsted for fuel. It was a masterpiece of ambition, yes, but a failure of realism. In the end, war is not won by the most fearsome weapon on paper, but by the most dependable one in the mud. The Sherman may have lacked the King Tiger's armor or firepower, but it had something far more valuable: the ability to show up, day after day, mile after mile, until victory was assured. That is the quiet truth of industrial warfare and the enduring lesson of Germany's super tank. If this deep dive into the myth and reality of the King Tiger revealed truths you hadn't fully grasped about engineering hubris, logistical fragility, and the real cost of over-design, we invite you to subscribe and tap the bell for our next episode. We go beyond the legends, using declassified reports, veteran testimony, and technical forensics to reconstruct history as it truly unfolded, not as it's been dramatized. And if you know someone who served in armor, logistics, or maintenance, someone who understands that reliability is its own form of courage, please share this film. Their generation lived these lessons. Our duty is to remember them accurately. This isn't just military history. It's a masterclass in why sustainability wins wars.